Okay, in the last session, we discussed about Agile methodology, and the process that supports the Agile methodology is one of the process which is Scrum. So now
Scrum.
today we will look into the another process which is the extreme programming. I
Okay.
think you can see here this is the extreme programming, which is also one of the approach which can be used for the Agile framework. I mean, which supports the Agile framework.
Okay.
So extreme programming, it takes an approach to iterative development. And what is the difference between the Scrum and the extreme programming is, so for the Scrum, like we will be having a 2 week sprint where we will identify the user stories that need to be delivered in the current sprint. And we will have the sprint backlog and we will do the sprint planning. And the output of the sprint planning is the sprint release. So here in the extreme programming, here also they will be having a sprint which is of 2 weeks. And in these 2 weeks, what they will do is they will develop the new versions which may be developed several times per day. So it means like, say, for example, if I developed one of the user stories assigned to me, which is a login screen uh, design. So I started working on the user story and I mentioned like my user story is done. So done in the sense like it should meet all the acceptance criteria that has mentioned in the user story. So my story is done so that I'm saying like what are the user story that is assigned to me in the current sprint is done. So in Scrum, what will happen is like this sprint will be, I mean, this user story, whatever the login user story that has been assigned to me, will be moved into the sprint release. So once the sprint release is done, then we will look at the how the login screen has been developed. But here in the extreme programming, you after completing your when you say that your user story for the login screen is done, then at the same time instead of waiting for the sprint planning, you can have a demo on the login screen or the user story that what you have designed, so that you can have multiple versions which can be released in the 2 week of sprint.
Okay.
Okay, so what happens here is like, say, for example, the sprint duration is 2 weeks, and you have given the user story points like it's a five in the sense like 5 into 8 hours, which is nothing but 8 working hours. Say it's a 40 hours that you have given to that particular user story for designing the login screen. So which is nothing but 5 working days. So in that 5 working days, what you have did is like you have already completed your user login screen design in the third day itself, and it has been moved to the testing team, and the testing team has tested the login screen based on the acceptance criteria or the test cases they have prepared. So now, once the testing is done, then we will say like the story is done. So what we will be doing is like we will give the demo in the third day or the fourth day of the morning to the client, so that he will have the review on the login screen. I mean the each individual user story that has been assigned to you, and he will give his feedback. So that whenever he is giving the feedback, you are modifying the change that has been recommended by the client. So you are maintaining a new version. So you are giving the versioning of the user task or the story that has been released. That is
Okay.
nothing but we can have multiple new versions that can be built several times per day. So day in the sense like here we are assuming that our story points has been assigned it as a 5 days, which is nothing but 40 hours.
Okay.
And you can see here what happens in the extreme programming framework. So we will select the user story for the release, and we will break down the stories into tasks, and then we will plan for the release. After, I mean, the planning is done, then we will work on that particular story or the task that has been assigned to the respective team member, which may be a developer or the QA. So they will develop, and they will test the software or the test the user stories, and they will release the user story. And once the user stories are released in the particular sprint, they will evaluate the sprint. Evaluate in the sense like whatever the user stories that you have released in the current sprint. So when you are giving the sprint demo, so once the sprint demo is done, then you will getting the feedback on the user stories that has been developed. So again, you will be collecting those requirements and you will be adding them as a new stories and putting them in our product backlog. And again,
Okay.
after, so in the evaluate system, we will get the whatever the change request that the client has been provided to us when we are giving a sprint demo. So these change requests, we will be converting it as a user stories and we will pushing them into our product backlog. Again,
Okay.
product backlog, we will select like in the last sprint, client has been given like three modifications to the say login screen. So what we will create is like we will create the three change requests as three new user stories and we will put them into our product backlog. So now when we start for the next sprint, I mean the sprint two is started. So in the sprint two, we need to take these three user stories, which will be the change request that has been given by the client in our earlier sprint demo. So that is how the cycle will be repeating.
Okay.
Are you clear till here?
Yeah.
Uh, Give me a second. Yeah, Anjani. So is it clear till now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah. Hello. Can
Yeah,
you hear me?
yeah, your voice is a bit slow.
Okay.
I am asking like, are you clear till now? The
Yeah.
external
Yeah. I'm
programming
clear.
cycle. Okay. So you just need to remember this is the process similar to whatever the framework that you have choose for the agile methodology, whether it is a scrum, extreme programming, or whatever it may be. So we will, for the first thing is we will be having the product backlog and we will select the user stories from the product backlog. And for the user stories, we will split into tasks. So how we will split into task is like, say, for example, in the login screen, you need to have a UI design. So you will create a task under that user stories stating that UI design for the login screen. So where this task has been assigned to the UI designer. And in the same story, you will create another task saying that validations for the username and password. So this task has been assigned to the developer who will write the code, validate the username and password as per the client requirement. And we will
Okay.
be creating a third task, which is nothing but, say, for example, validate the login screen, which is nothing but after completing the UI design and then the functionality of validating the username and password. Now, the third task is to validate the whatever the design as per the client requirement, whether it is placed at the right side, top corner of the website, or at the middle of the website, or is there any changes in the UI design when you work on multiple browsers, say in the Chrome browser, the UI design or the login screen pop-up has been moved to slightly right side, or in the IEX Internet Explorer, it has been moved to the bottom. So you are testing that UI browser compatibility of the UI design. So that is nothing but the third task. So for one story, we have created multiple tasks and these tasks has been assigned to the respective team members. Say my UI design has been assigned to the designing of the UI, like getting the login screen UI and what is the font that should be used for the username and password and what is the text box size and how much characters it should hello and then does the text box css, which is nothing but cascading style sheets. So the UI will apply all the styles recommended by the client and then he will move it to the functional second task, which is nothing but the developer who is going to work on the coding part. And the third one is the QA team who is going to test the UI and the functionality of the login screen. This is how we will break down the user stories into multiple tasks.
Okay.
We will get a clear understanding when we start working on our project hospital booking system. So there we will create one user story and we will split that user story into multiple tasks so that we will get some clear understanding on that.
Yeah.
That is what we have discussed. So the extreme programming or is nothing but an incremental development. So which we have the frequent system releases and the customer involvement here will be full-time engaged with the team because we are delivering multiple releases on the same user stories that are planned. And we will be having, remember this word as a pair programming. People not process
Okay.
through a pair programming, collective ownership, and a process that avoids long working hours. So pair programming in the sense like here, I think I had mentioned somewhere, customer involvement is a key part of it. The role of customer. Pair programming, yeah. So I think this is hiding my screen. How to get this? You can see, so this is the pair programming. What is the pair program in the sense like for one particular task or for one particular story, two developers has been assigned, whereas one will be monitoring and then one will be writing the code. See, it's nothing
Okay.
but one person, one developer will be working on how to implement this functionality. So when he says like this is the way that we need to implement the functionality, the second person will write the code for the functionality that has been described. So
Okay.
this is nothing but the programming, and this is one of the technique that will be used in the uh, extreme programming.
Okay.
So these are the XP and Agile principles. So where we already discussed about the incremental development, which is supported through small frequent system releases. And we also discussed about the customer involvement is more and change supported through regular system releases because when we are giving the demo to the client, customer on the completion of the task itself, on the completion of the user story itself. So when we are giving a demo, we are getting the feedback. So we are maintaining multiple versions here. So we have multiple releases.
Okay.
And this is also the customer involvement, which we discussed. So this is how the XP practices will mean. If you see that the whole team will be involved. So there will be a planning game. So that is also we will be discussing like poker planning is there. Poker planning is nothing but poker planning and then t-shirt sizing. So these are some of the techniques that will be used to give the story points for the user stories. So
Okay.
again, remember these words like when we start working on our project. So when we create the user story, so you need to assign some story points. Story points is nothing but the number of days that you are going to complete that particular story. Say if I am assigned a story like a login screen design or upload patient details is one of the story that has been assigned to you. So I'll ask for so the team, entire Scrum team will be involved, which consists of developer, QAs, all the members. So as it is in the development phase, so the developers, so they will give the sprint uh, poker points like it is a three story points or one story point or five story points or two story points. So each story point we will be calculating as a 8 working hours. So for your story point uploading the patient details, you have given three story points, which is nothing but 3 into 8, 24 hours. And remember this 24 hours, we will also be using this 24 hours to the burn down chart. When we discussed about the Scrum ceremonies, we have the burn down chart. So these hours will be used to burn the effect, burn the efforts that you have been put on that particular day on that particular user stories that has been assigned.
Okay.
This also we will be discussing when we have the user stories divided to in our project, and we will be assigning the story points. I'm just giving a brief introduction. Those are the story points, and we will be also having a t-shirt size modeling is also there. So which is nothing but S in the sense of like it's a small story, which can be a story point of 1, 2, and then M is a size, medium size, which can be a story, user story of 3 to 3 points. And then we will have the L, which is nothing but a user story with the story points 3 to 5. And Excel
Okay.
is the user story which is having the story points more than 5. And
Okay.
double Excel is the user story which is having the story points of 8. So 8 is the maximum story points that can be considered in the 2 week sprint.
Okay.
So here they will be having the planning game, and they will plan for the small releases, and they will do the customer test. And you can see here there will be a collective ownership, and we will be having the coding standards that has been designed by the development team or the architect who will design that these are the coding standards that need to be followed for the every user story. And remember these words like pair programming, metaphor, continuous integration, and refactoring. So we will see these words. These are the 12 practices that what I have mentioned in the previous chart. Like we'll have this planning game, we'll be having the small releases, we will be having a metaphor, simple design, testing, refactoring, pair programming, collective ownership, continuous integration, 40-hour work week, on-site customer, and coding standards. These are the 12 practices that need to follow for the extreme programming. Now we will see what does each practice is going to tell about. So planning game. So planning game is nothing but you are going to sit with the team and you will plan for what are the user stories that we need to deliver in the next release iteration, in the sense like in the next sprint release. And you will see when you say like we are having these are the user stories that we are planned for the next iteration. So I need to check whether the user stories are provided by the customer, which is in the sense like client or not. So here,
Okay.
when I mention the word customer, you can frame it as a client and also the product owner or product manager. So usually user stories will be prepared by the product owner. So product owner is the person responsible for user story. If he says like the user story has completed, in the sense like he need to have the clear description of the user story followed by the acceptance criteria. So we will see what are the 5 stories that we have planned for the next release. So those user stories are provided by the customer or not provided by the customer here, in the sense like user stories will be created as a placeholders, but in that particular user story, we need to have a proper description. Along with the proper description, the important concept here is the acceptance criteria. So once you have the acceptance criteria written and the description, then only we will say like we will take that user story into our next iteration or the iteration that what we planned, or we can say it as a next sprint.
Okay.
So here the technical persons determine the schedules, estimates, costs. So this is usually the general process, like the project manager and the technical people who will be involved. Like if we say like if we will be taking these 5 user stories from the backlog to the next iteration. So these 5 stories, to how many developers we need to assign to work on these 5 user stories? Do we need to have 2 or 3 developers? And how many QA members required to test these the 5 user stories that what we have planned. And
Okay.
finally, the result of the collaboration between the customer. And once we have done this third point, like technical persons determine the schedule, estimates, and costs, then it will be shared to the customer saying like we are delivering these 5 user stories in the next sprint or in the next iteration. So for this sprint, the customer says like, okay, these 5 stories make sense to me, so that these 5 stories will be used to achieve some of the functionality or few functionality that needed for his product.
Okay.
And then small releases, as the term itself indicates, like we will be developing uh, the releases in terms of small functionality, like considering, say, when you say like uploading patient details. So uploading patient details, we will not take it as a one of the user story, and we will complete that into 2 weeks or 4 weeks sprint. So we will break down that particular users, what is the requirement, upload patient details, that we will be considering it as a feature. And that particular feature, we will split into multiple user stories. And in the user stories, so what will be the set of user stories that can be released in the first sprint? And then what are the set of stories that can be released in the next sprint?
Okay.
So we are breaking down the feature which is uploading the patient details into multiple user stories, and we will plan like which are the user stories that can be released into particular sprint. So which makes like we are delivering the or we are releasing the requirement in the form of small chunks.
Okay. Like dividing the user stories into small tasks. That
Dividing the no here I have mentioned like say for example we have the so here you have mentioned like upload patient details, right?
yeah.
So we will consider this as one of my feature. Let me give some color. So in this particular feature, now I need to identify to complete this particular upload patient details, what are the information that you need to have. So I say like the first user story one will be, you need to capture the patient details. I mean, patient details in the sense like what are the details that need to be captured, like patient, I'll mention capture the details. So here I'll mention like patient name or his Aadhaar card or PAN card or whatever maybe it is. And then his date of birth and his residential address. We'll say like address. And then his contact number. Okay, so now in this particular user story, you need to develop a screen which consists of all these details. So that particular screen need to capture the patient details. So here you need to, in the screen that what you're going to design, that screen should have patient name, name of the patient. Like it should be again divided into patient first name and last name or middle name or any preferred name.
Mm.
So we got the four text boxes or four fields here. And then I have mentioned it as a PAN card. So whatever may be the card that has been used there. So whether in India we will be using the PAN card and the other card as address or ID proofs. And
Yeah.
then we will see the date of birth. So it should be a user should able to enter his date of birth. And then user should able to enter his address. And user should able to provide the contact number. So these are the fields that need to be developed in the user story one. So what happens here is now this is what I will say is the UI design for patient details. So now my user story two will be, so you need to save the patient details. So you are entering the details in the screen, but that details need to be saved in somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Save the patient details in the sense like in database. So here in the database, you need to maintain a table to store the table design will be there. Again, this table design is in DB. I'm calling it as a database. In database, you will be having the table design and you will set the primary and foreign keys. And then if needed, you may need to, I mean, that DB person need to write a query to save the patient details, comma, update the patient details, and then delete the patient details. Okay, so now this is my user story 2, and then my user story 3, which will be insurance details. So here, insurance details, you need to have a screen with appropriate with fields required to capture the insurance provider, or we can say it as the required to capture the insurance provider, or simply you can say it as a provider. So again here in this provider or the insurance provider screen, so what are the fields or the data that you want to capture for this insurance provider? So you need to have the insurance name, or I'll maybe give it as a provider name, and say something like some XX. We will see like what are the different fields that need to be captured for the provider. And for these fields, again, you need to design the screen. A new screen should be designed to capture the insurance or the provider details. Insurance slash provider details. Okay. And now there will be another user story, which I will say like, so you have designed the insurance details screen, and the insurance details should be saved somewhere in the database. So I'll say like save the insurance or the provider details. So again here, details in database. I'll say it as a DB. So again in DB, what you need to have, we are going to have a new table design, and then the same, the table should have the primary key and foreign key, and followed by update, delete. The here in the case of patient, I'll mention like insurance, or instead of calling insurance, we'll say like the provider is nothing but our insurance agent, and update the provider details and delete the provider details. So till now we got uh, 4 user stories, right? So if we say like this is the feature, upload patient details, and in this we divided this particular feature into 4 user stories. This is how you need to create the user stories for the particular feature.
Okay.
So this you will get into practice once you have once they got through any sample project, or once they have shared any of the working project that has been assigned to you. So they will share like these are the user stories for this particular feature. So based on the reference you are going to create, again, say for example, uh, let's say available doctors is one of our feature. So for this, you need to split this available doctors into multiple users, available doctors feature into multiple user stories. And
Okay.
what we said, like for every user story, we need to have the, I'll say user story description. I'll mention like description in the sense like valid description or appropriate description is fine. And then followed by acceptance criteria. Right. So this is how you need to split the features into user stories. And for each user story, you need to give the appropriate description and you need to give the acceptance criteria. We will again see the acceptance criteria when we create a product backlog for this particular hospital appointment booking system. And we will derive like what are the different epics we are having. Like creating a website will be an epic, and patient portal login will be one of the feature. Upload patient details, including incidence details, will be one of the feature. And then show a list of details according to the insurance coverage. It might